Hey, what's good, cannabis investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis News from September 16th to the 22nd. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it as it helps out my channel, and subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos. Think of these videos as a time capsule. I've put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the U.S. cannabis industry, identify top U.S. MSOs that you keep seeing pop up that you think will be worth more in the future than they are now based on their current market caps and new markets coming online, and take advantage whenever you feel ready if you wish to do so. We're going to start with some great news out of Ohio, as dispensaries have sold over $100 million worth of cannabis since the start of legal rec sales, and so this stems from August 6th to September 14th. Ohio Division of Cannabis Control has shared there's been over $103 million in legal sales between that time, $65.3 million of which came from rec, and $38 million from med. And it's interesting because basically in July, the total sales that they reached was $38 million only because all they could do was sell medical up until August 6th. And so more info here if you wanted to pause to read, and that's coming from 127 dispensaries that can sell adult use as of right now. And so just to share what Headset.io has for August sales, so this would have been from the 6th to the end of August after legal sales launched. And so from Headset, just if anyone's curious, you can grab all the links in the comments. And what's also cool about Headset is, of course, they serve a lot of markets so that you can check out a lot more if you're interested. But with that, we finally got an update out of Illinois. Updated as of last Thursday, so thank you, Gov of Illinois, for finally doing your job. All that to point out, record number of items sold this past month, even more than last December, which still stands as the best sales month ever at 154 million. And so August saw 147.3 million, exceeding July, which is good to see. Seems to be a new trend that other states have shown as well based on my last week's video, but still has not exceeded the March high, which was an anomaly for Illinois. Typically summer or December is the best month, but we're not going to complain. Obviously, the more stores that can open and the more opportunity given entrepreneurs, the more we're going to see these sales rise. But it depends who you ask, because if you ask Alan Brockstein, apparently the sales growth remains slow, and so maybe he's suffering from a bit of brain damage still. Obviously, they can only grow as quickly as the policymakers in Illinois allow those they promised access to open up shops. But more here from Alan if you wanted to see a different perspective. All the links will be in the comments as well if you are interested. While moving along to New York from MJ Biz Daily, as New York cannabis sales could pass $1 billion in 2024 after a rocky start. And of course, take this with a grain of salt, but I've shared snippets in past videos highlighting the growth that they're finally seeing 3.5 years after legalizing. And since they've done $429.9 million in revenue from January through the end of August, they think that it's plausible that they could exceed $1 billion. But this is the kicker, because there seems to be an estimated 200 licensed retailers ready to open for business by the end of September. Now, all this sounds promising. We know the Office of Cannabis Management has been less than competent in the past in helping deliver on promises like this. And so we'll see what happens. We wish them luck, of course, but wanted to recap that there were 189 licensed retailers throughout New York State thus far, according to MJ Biz Daily. And so while that's promising and we hope things head in the right direction, Green Market Report says that New York City still has 2,600 unlicensed operational shops, and so they've got a long way to go. And while I'm not exactly sure what they refer to here, saying only 79 legal ones, when the last one said that there is 189 licensed, maybe this is referring to legal rec dispensaries versus medical. I'm not exactly sure, but just wanted to point out, I don't know which number is exactly correct. So if you can confirm, let me know in the comments. But lots of work to still be done in New York in order to iron out things to lessen the black market's capabilities and ensure success for the legal market. But just wanted to share this because when I went to cannabis.ny.gov, went to dispensary location verification, there's 194 adult use cannabis dispensaries, and so not exactly sure which number is true. I'd like to go with this one because it's directly from them. And if this is adult use, not even just med, I think that's for the rec sales. Again, I don't know. If you know, let me know in the comments, but just trying to paint a clear picture for you. From Cannabis Business Times, though, 11 states projected to be billion-dollar cannabis markets in 2024. The growth continues as Americans want to vote for legal cannabis with their dollars, and Maryland will be the newest state to join the 10-figure club. And so, love this article as it summarizes a lot of good info for us. It includes 2 massive med-only markets that could change a whole lot if they flip for adult use in the next 12 to 18 months. And the odds are good. So with that, you can pause to read, but just to bring it down to the existing billion-dollar cannabis markets, nice to see Missouri's already snuck in there. And then states that are close, Oregon, New Jersey, Nevada, and then Ohio, of course, just turned on, but probably by this time next year they'll be there. Worth noting, this data comes from Brightfield Group. And then worth noting also, Nevada's 2024 sales projection is for adult adult use sales only, while all other is for adult use and med for whatever reason. And so, good article though. It has a lot of detail and some graphs too if you're interested. So of course the link will be in the comments if you wanted to go through that. Just figured I'd share a little bit more. But some more updates out of Florida. Happy to share from the Dank Informer as Sam asked the people, because you love to see the truth come out, and the people do right, giving Sam the big middle finger that they've deserved all along. And I can't wait to see the results in 6 days and 18 hours from now. I've got a few burner accounts that I'm going to go vote on, but this will no doubt be the dagger in the chest for the prohibitionists, I think, going forward. And on top of that, we did get a nice endorsement for Yeson3 from Dave Portnoy, who's got a massive audience, 22.7 million views. And that's the kind of exposure we like to see, as he highlights he can legally consume cannabis at home in Massachusetts and watch football on Sunday, but he can't do the same in Florida. Make it make sense, right? Any grown adult should be able to consume whatever substance they want in the freedom of their own home, especially when alcohol and tobacco are legal, and cannabis is the safest of all three. And while I did miss this last week, big kudos to Ben and Green Thumb for landing this partnership, as apparently Barstool Sports bets big on pot. And the media company recently announced this new partnership with multi-state operator Green Thumb Industries. The team intends to make custom content for consumers everywhere. Coverage will center around Green Thumb Brands Rhythm and Dog Walker's pre-rolls. And so massive precedent, I think, and great move by Ben. We'll see how this ends up turning out in the long run. But it'd just be the beginning of more cannabis content, more exposure, more normalization, and all that good stuff that comes with ending cannabis prohibition. So full links in the comments if you want to go through that. Well, just some state updates. Cannabis Business Times. Pennsylvania lawmakers filed that bipartisan bill to legalize adult use cannabis, and so they've got 15 co-sponsors. And so I recall sharing this in my last week's video, though I don't know if introducing a bill and filing it are the same thing. Hopefully intro is the first step and then filing it is the second step. All that to point out, I will update you as we go along. You can pause to read more about this bill. However, the good news is a pair of bipartisan lawmakers are hoping to change that before the Commonwealth's legislative session ends on November 30th. So high hopes. It seems like they want to get this done and passed in a little over 2.5 months. Will they get it done? Probably not, because it's government, but we will see if they start to act quickly, because Ohio is obviously putting a lot of pressure on them, as they mention it here. With that, some other state news from marijuana moment. Idaho activists filed petition to put cannabis legalization on state's 2026 ballot. So that sounds very promising, as we are pursuing personal use and home cultivation decriminalization. The Campaign Kind Idaho announced in an email to supporters Tuesday, explaining that under the proposal, adults would not need to register for a card, get a license to personal grow, go to a doctor to renew your prescription, and you get to choose what works best for you. So sounds very, citizen focused and for the people. I invite you to pause, read a little bit more. While it's still very early, and this is again 2026, so that'd be year and a half almost. Worth noting, though, nothing in this section shall be construed to allow private or commercial sale or resale of any controlled substance. Now, obviously that's annoying because it sounds like there'd be no commercial market, but maybe this will change once cannabis is moved from Schedule 1, where it never belonged, to Schedule 3, and it's deemed a less harsh controlled substance. Could that modify things? Only time will tell, but again, this is long ways in the future, so I'll update you. Well, we got some news out of North Carolina, as apparently voters continue to back cannabis legalization for medicinal use, at least first. And so while North Carolina is one of the states that doesn't seem to have any access to a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative, which is a damn shame, the good news is they asked 771 voters if medical cannabis should be legal in North Carolina, and the people see it as a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative that they want. Only 16% said no, 14 weren't sure, 70 with an overwhelming yes. And so we love to see the normalization continue as people want cannabis and they're making their voices heard. Well, some updates out of states that are trying to crack down on the crack hemp. Hemp sales are back on. Missouri regulators par down on intoxicating hemp products. Basically, the state health department will focus on edibles or drinks that mimic candy or regular food, giving up the push to ban all products made with hemp-derived THC. And so while that is a step in the right direction, obviously it's easier said than done, because technically these hemp products aren't violating any laws because of that Farm Bill loophole. And so until that gets closed, we're going to have to deal with this competition. Though I think it is good to see more states try to crack down on these untested wildcard substances, as it was California 2 weeks ago finally putting their foot down, and New Jersey last week. A while ago was Massachusetts. Now Missouri is attempting to do what they can. And on top of that, out of Texas, the Supreme Court decision could kill hemp delta industry due to confusion with pot. Now, unfortunately, though, in Texas, you don't have adult use where they're actually selling the medicinal THC that all of the studies that have built up over time are really built off of. So ideally, though, if you can get this unsafe, untested substance out of the streets that has been proven to be the cause of psychotic episodes or the cannabis poisonings, all these things we hear about, not caused by the cannabis plant, but caused by these hemp-derived synthetics that we just don't know a whole lot about. And so just to point that out, Delta-8 tetrahydrocannabinol in the Emergency Department, a case series from September 2024. Conclusions. This case series is a snapshot of the burden experienced by emergency departments because of Delta-8 availability. And again, this is the hemp-derived gas station crack weed and not the medicinal plant sold out of legal adult use dispensaries and med dispensaries. And clinicians should maintain a high index of suspicion for Delta-8 use, especially in patients with altered mental status, anxiety, or cardiac. I'm not sure if they're missing a word there. All that to point out, it's worth noting the difference and distinction between Delta-8 synthetic bullshit, THC, and then the actual medicinal cannabis plant, that's Delta-9 THC, the real deal stuff. And in this act of defiance, I'm very happy to share this story out of Atlanta Journal-Constitution, but basically pharmacists in Georgia are saying, fuck you to the DEA, it's about damn time. So either they know something we don't that's happening in the back end, obviously maybe the rescheduling has something to do with it, or we're just happy that they have the confidence in this medicinal plant to know that their case is solid, especially when the government backs cannabis being medicine with their 252-page report from HHS. And so it's a new frontier, says pharmacists, hoping to set precedent for other Georgia pharmacies. Pharmacy in Augusta dispenses medical cannabis, defying warning from the DEA. You love to see it. The ball's on this guy, as Vic Johnson, pharmacist and owner of the Living Well Pharmacy, believes the ever-evolving legal and political landscape of cannabis laws are on his side. And we would agree. We salute you, Vic. And so good luck to all the other pharmacists there. Unfortunately, this is behind a paywall, but I wish all of those who have the courage to sell a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative in Georgia, despite what the DEA says, we salute you and we hope you have a very successful future. With that, on to studies about Delta-9 and the real THC that comes from the medical cannabis plant, measuring the impact of medical cannabis law, adoption, and employer-sponsored health insurance costs, a difference in difference analysis, 2003 to 2022, and this came out September 17th, 2024. I invite you to pause to read the intro and methods, but the main thing for results is to highlight for states that adopted a medical cannabis law, there was a significant decrease in the log average total premium per employee for single coverage plans per year, considering the first 10 years of policy change, compared with states without such laws. That speaks volumes. Under a hypothetical scenario where all 50 states adopted medical cannabis in 2022, we estimated that employers and employees could collectively save billions on healthcare coverage, potentially reducing healthcare expenditures contribution to GDP by 0.65% in 2022. So pretty promising results. Obviously, deschedule the damn plant. Well, we got this one from JAMA Network, fresh off the press, September 18th. Year-long cannabis use for medical symptoms and brain activation during cognitive processes. So asking the question, is there an association between year-long cannabis use for medical symptoms and brain activation during cognitive processes implicated in such cannabis use? So I invite you to read the findings and meaning, while you can pause to read this bit from the abstract as well, but I'm just going to bring you down to the results. As no statistically significant difference in brain activation between the two time points, baseline and 1 year, in those with medical cannabis cards, and no association between changes in cannabis use frequency and brain activation after 1 year were found. So it seemed like regardless of how much cannabis use, there was no change in how your brain worked, which is very promising. And so conclusions and relevance. In this cohort study of adults obtaining medical cannabis cards for medical symptoms, no significant association between brain activation in the areas of cognition, of working memory, reward, and inhibitory control in 1 year of cannabis use was observed. The results warrant further studies that probe the association of cannabis at higher doses with greater frequency in younger age groups with larger, more diverse cohorts. So very interesting findings. Cannabis does not ruin your memory or anything like that. While for medical cannabis users see short-term gains in health-related quality of life, I actually shared the raw data study in my last week's video, but just wanted to share this again because the findings were so good. As from baseline, respondents improved in all areas of health-related quality of life that researchers evaluated, including less pain, more energy, and better emotional, social, and physical functioning. You can't make this shit up. Deschedule the damn plant already. So I just invite you to read more if you're interested. Full links in the comments. But again, new studies from PubMed, National Survey of Cannabis Use Among U.S. Adults According to Obesity Status, 2016 to 2022, from last month. I don't know if I shared this last month. I might have. I apologize if I'm sharing it again. I invite you to pause to read all the details. But the conclusion, cannabis use is correlated with lower body mass index. What do you know? Fascinating findings, right? Legal cannabis will likely have a healthier, less fat population. As legalization and prevalence of the drug in the U.S. increases, the prevalence of obesity may decline. Move over, Ozempic. However, clinicians should view this outcome along with the known health risks associated with cannabis use. Yeah, and well, what we're finding from studies, whole lot of benefits and not a whole lot of risks. But Lots more to be found. Looking at edible cannabis for chronic lower back pain associations with pain, mood, and intoxication. For whatever reason, the date on this one's down here, accepted September 10th, 2024. So I invite you to pause to read about a lot of past findings about CBD. I'm sure we're all aware as I shared many studies on CBD in the past. But all that to point out, over the 2-week ad libitum administration period, results suggested pain reductions across participants using all forms of cannabis. It's a magical plant. However, trends suggested that more frequent use of CBD-dominant edible cannabis may be associated with greater reductions in perceived pain over the 2-week observation period, and these findings support the short-term analgesic effects of THC and anxiolytic effect of CBD, and further suggest that orally administered THC and CBD should continue to be evaluated for the potential to provide both acute and extended relief from chronic low back pain without the side effects of pharmaceuticals. So Big Pharma must be shaken in their boots. Well, we've got this interesting one from Taylor and Francis, examining the context of cannabis use in parenting, an exploratory ecological momentary assessment study from September 4th, 2024. And so you can pause to read the objective and design of the study, but main thing to point out the results, very interesting. Parents rarely use cannabis with their children present, obviously. Parents had greater odds of using positive parenting during the same and subsequent time periods when using cannabis. What do you know? Cannabis might make you a more attentive and loving parent. Sounds counterintuitive, but if you have any experience with it, it's like, obviously, right? The relationship of the parent to individuals who were present during the cannabis use was related to the use of positive and aggressive parenting, maybe instilling discipline, like more children need these days. While conclusions, our findings reveal a complicated relationship, no doubt, but more research definitely would be needed between cannabis use and parenting among a sample of cannabis users. However, it also provides some information on ways parents can engage in harm reduction to support positive parenting. And yeah, seems like cannabis is certainly a more positive parenting tool than alcohol. Almost goes without saying. Well, actually, the biggest news of this week that flew under the radar, DEA acknowledging new standard for designating medical value of drugs. And the new 2-step test was initiated by the U.S. Health Department and Human Services during its evaluation of cannabis rescheduling. So thank you, HHS, for using cannabis rescheduling as the precedent to introduce this new standard that makes a lot more sense, apparently, than past standards. And so, of course, I invite you to pause to read. All that to point out is this is going to make the HHS's and government's case more strong, I believe, in December at the ALJ hearing. And worth pointing out, this snippet down here, cannabis reform opponents, such as Smart Approaches to Cannabis, decried the 2-step analysis used by HHS earlier this year. But attorney Shane Pennington, who I featured in many videos from admin.law, said it's more likely that the DEA was given no choice in the matter, since by law it's required to accept HHS's scientific evaluation on scheduling proposals. From my understanding, because of the Chevron deference, which means they don't need to defer to the DEA anymore. They defer to what the science says, and the science, or at least the government, is now admitting that cannabis is that. And so, of course, all eyes on the ALJ hearing in December. If you know more about this, let me know in the comments, but definitely a big win that we weren't expecting, and not necessarily a massive headline story, but definitely paves the way for a lot more in the future, I'd like to think. And so from Issue 420, just summarizing what this means, this is a pretty big news since it's the first time the DEA says the new 2-step test is valid. One of the main arguments from prohibitionists is that the DEA did not use the traditional 5-step test, and they were planning lawsuits based on that. And so if they were planning lawsuits based on that, and the DEA just confirmed that the 2-step is valid, holy shit, they got to throw all those lawsuits out the window. And apparently the OLC memo played a big role here. And so while this is positive, it's still worth noting that ultimately Trump's Attorney General pick is going to be a big factor on how quickly cannabis gets normalized and how well received it is, come 2025 if he were to end up winning. And so take from that what you will. Let me know in the comments if you know more or what you think this could lead to. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. But moving along, as for marijuana moment, as that Senate committee did approve the Doobie Act to prevent agencies from using past cannabis use to deny employment and security clearances. So it sounds like the federal government will be able to get some more competent individuals working for them shortly, which is definitely a big win if this ever becomes law, but it likely won't because it's still just a Senate committee and not a Senate floor vote. More details here if you're interested, but obviously it will help recruit more talent, as one thing in the past is the government's had trouble hiring quality and talented individuals because a lot of them smoke cannabis, and ultimately they want nothing to do with the bullshit rules that would be imposed on them. So the bill takes crucial steps by aligning Fed policy with existing agency guidance, ensuring that past cannabis use alone doesn't automatically disqualify talented individuals from public service. One way to end the discrimination on cannabis users, and this approach will expand our talent pool and create a fair, more inclusive hiring process. Yes, it will, but again, will it ever see the light of day of the Senate floor? Not likely while Schmuck Schumer is in there because we know what he's been holding up and that he doesn't want to work for the will of the American people, sadly. But on to MSO news. Green Thumb announces their second $50 million share repurchase program, as they did one last year and I believe it's ended, hence the new one, as the board of directors has authorized a $50 million share repurchase program. It authorizes, pursuant to a normal course issuer bid, the repurchase of up to 10.5 million shares from time to time over the next 12 months. And under the company's previous repurchase program that expired on the 10th of September, Green Thumb repurchased a total of 6.5 million shares for $73.3 million. So obviously they want to create value by buying shares back and reducing the number of outstanding shares, making sure that everyone who owns Green Thumb as shareholders gets a bigger piece of their existing pie, which can't argue with that. While the repurchase program will commence on September 23rd and expire next year on September 22nd, though it's worth noting, they're not obligated to purchase any shares. If management determines it has a better use for its cash reserves, it is under no obligation to purchase shares and can use cash for that as well. So they've got options, but definitely something that more MSOs could possibly, do as well and learn from, because definitely instills more investor confidence. While Trulieve, as they're going to open a medical cannabis dispensary in Lake Worth, Florida. Love to see them preparing for a legal adult use world post that November ballot initiative. And so grand opening next Friday, September 27th. I'm not sure exactly which number, but this has to be like 130 something in Florida alone, and then 170 or 180 nationwide. Let me know in the comments if you know the correct numbers. But all that to point out, I'm very happy as a Trulieve shareholder seeing them prepare for a bright future. More information here if you want to pause to read. Well, from Air Wellness, a surprise press release. Wasn't expecting this, and as an Air Wellness shareholder, I'm not too concerned because the company is very well prepared for the future as well with their Florida footprint and retiring some debt recently. But as of September 18th, David Goubert has stepped down as the president and CEO of the company. No reason given, unfortunately, but Stephen M. Cohen will step in as interim CEO, effective immediately, who previously served as outside legal advisor to the company. Seems to be a trend. A lot of people who served outside legal advisor or counsel of the company seem to come in and think they can change things. So I wish this guy the best, but Air, no doubt, has a very bright future ahead as well with that Florida footprint. And of course, reform on the horizon. Well, from New Cannabis Ventures, Canadian cannabis sales rebound in July to 440.7 million Canadian dollars, which funny enough is only 323 million US dollars. And so I anticipate that maybe Michigan can catch Canada's numbers by December of this year, if they're lucky. Maybe it'll take till next year, but we'll see if we get close to that, as Canadian cannabis sales continue to rise, thanks in large part due to Ontario. But more information here if you wanted to read the breakdown of which provinces were helping lead the way. But obviously Ontario, and then Alberta, and then British Columbia in third place. Sadly, Quebec still shit in the bed with like 50 dispensaries trying to serve 8 million people. No wonder it's never going to work. But with that, some European updates before we round off. Thank you, the Dank Informer, as Dutch cannabis pilot programs update. Current retail price ranges from 5 to 13 EU per gram, depending on quality, and wholesale is estimated at 50% of that, or around 2.5 to 6.5 per EU gram. Apparently, coffee shops enrolled in the Dutch pilot cannabis program will at some point be required to source all cannabis via the legal pilot program and drop the illicit market suppliers. Interesting that they're not forced to do that already, but apparently, if you're interested, VFF, Village Farms International, is one of the Canadian LPs supplying this program, as they have 2 facilities planned. So again, take that with a grain of salt. That's what Dank Informer is sharing. I have not fact-checked him on that, but if you're looking for one company that might benefit from this, obviously the numbers are really small, so it's not going to benefit as much as US MSOs from new states coming online, but opportunity could be there if you are interested. And so, yes, that's, again, the Dutch cannabis pilot program from the Dank Informer. So hopefully that continues and they see more success. Well, got this one from swissinfo.ch, and it's a little bit older, from September 5th, but figured I would share it because obviously it's what happens when you end prohibition and you find out, oh, legalization is actually beneficial. Zurich cannabis study receives positive assessment. Yeah, no shit. And so more information here if you wanted to pause to read. Well, it's a small study, only 2,100 people taking part in the pilot program. Of these, 150 people have stopped participating. Over half of participants consume cannabis at least 4 times a week. Over a 12-month period, a total of just 300 kilograms of cannabis products were sold to participants in 21 pharmacies, and a total of 36,000 sales of hashish and dried cannabis flowers were recorded. And so the unfortunate thing is it's scheduled to run until October 2026, so we're likely not going to see the Swiss government reevaluate what they currently have going on until then. Obviously, they could look at what's happening and be like, man, why don't we just launch a commercial market and get ahead, raise the tax dollars, create the jobs and all that? but they're European, very socialist, so whatever. But the data doesn't lie. Ending prohibition speaks for itself. While the Business Times, Thailand unveils new bill to regulate cannabis while keeping it legal, which is great to see after the new president who had come in basically said, we want to do a full 180 and ban cannabis outright again. Fuck that. And so Thailand has proposed a new bill to regulate its industry and restrict cannabis uses to primarily health and medical purposes, the latest effort to rein in rec smoking after several policy U-turns. And so the good news, the draft bill takes a softer stance compared to previous government efforts to regulate the industry. For one, it no longer contains a clause that explicitly outlaws rec use of cannabis, which was proposed in an earlier draft by ex-premier, and it also effectively means that the new government has abandoned a bid to reclassify the plant as a narcotic, because it ain't. It's a medicine, if anything. And so more info here if you wanted to pause to read. But last few stories. And so where are Germany's planned cannabis model projects? That is a great question, especially when phase 1 was off to such a great start. Apparently Pillar 2, which would introduce pilot projects where open sale of adult use cannabis would be allowed for a limited duration in order to scientifically study the impacts on various areas. Just use the data from Canada and US states. Don't waste your fucking time, including the black market, health, and youth protection. Fair enough. Now, the good news was that while they thought they had to pass a secondary law to implement Pillar 2, as it was reported in May, it's now expected to be regulated under the current CanG law, meaning a separate law will not need to be passed to push it through. However, a draft bill, which everyone is waiting on, apparently, still needs to be written by Karl Lauterbach, the guy that we can thank for removing cannabis from their narcotics list in the first place. So thank you, Karl, for doing that. But please stop dragging your feet and get this draft bill done so that we can see Pillar 2 take off and see even more success than Pillar 1 in Germany. So more info here if you wanted to pause to read, otherwise full links in the comments. But thought we'd end on a happier note, as at least one European country has some balls. New study backs full cannabis legalization in Czech Republic, projecting $5.5 billion in social benefits annually. You love to see when policymakers focus on the benefits that ending prohibition is going to bring, instead of focusing on the perceived concerns of idiot politicians who just use that bullshit as talking points, right? So great to see numerous efforts to convince government ministers and the general public that it would be beneficial for the country has now been launched. So full-scale efforts, and so 5.5 billion in Czech currency is equivalent to about 218 million euros per year, just to put some context there. But the study, what did it find? All these benefits. The research suggested that if only self-cultivation was legalized, the country would see a net social benefit of 1.2 billion per year and 16.5 billion over the first 11 years. Assuming that a portion of the cannabis currently supplied by the black market will shift into the legal sphere, the strategy would see 0.1 billion annually and 1.5 billion annually, 11 years, from taxes and fees for public budgets, though these would be offset by cost of registration and enforcement. And obviously, the cheaper you make it compared to the black market, based on providing equal access to opportunity, the more people will spend on that cheaper product. In the second scenario, where both self-cultivation and cannabis clubs were legalized, the study projects higher returns, 1.5 billion per year and 20.8 billion over 11 years. Public budgets would benefit by 0.2 billion annually and 1.8 billion over the same period. The inclusion of cannabis clubs would act as an important step towards more organized consumption while maintaining low implementation costs, because we have alcohol consumption lounges known as bars. Might as well normalize cannabis in the same way. While the best part, a comprehensive model including a regulated market, baby, as well as a self-cultivation and clubs promise the highest returns by a significant margin, no shit, with the net social benefit forecast to be 5.5 billion per year or 77.2 billion over 11 years. It would also bring an estimated 2.6 billion annually and 41.2 billion annually over the first 11 years through taxation and fees, minus collection and administrative costs, let alone the jobs that it would help create and all that other positive stuff, likely increasing real estate values. So more information here if you're interested. Seems like there's a media campaign and all, but we'll keep you updated as that moves along. But that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned anything, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you next week for This Week in Cannabis News. Have a great weekend, everybody. Take care.